God! I can't even. When we think about, the origins of TACP, military subcultures are established. They're rooted in our historical narratives and our stories. You actually have to go back really to the inception of air power to understand, what was the Air Force thinking at the time in a way that sort of created the follow-on cultural conditions that led to the rise of TACP.
The airplane was too new in development, and some observers even pessimistically stated that it was against nature for man to soar in the skies. They looked on the early single-seaters as strictly a freak invention that would soon be relegated to the museums and never used again.
Anytime you get a new weapon on the battlefield, it's like you've got to have, a new tech goes with new doctrine, right? And new doctrine was not something that we actually had the luxury of in World War I. And so there's all these questions about really how we apply this thing.
As a military weapon was employed to a limited extent in World War I. In the battle for Western Europe, Allied pilots like Captain Eddie Rickenbacker prepared to engage Germany's top aviators in the skies over the battlefield. But in that war, the airplane did not contribute much in the achieving of the ultimate victory.
Most air power historians would probably agree that the airplane's fundamental mission in World War I was reconnaissance. But at the same time, there's potential there, right? And I think that's what everybody saw. And so, you start to look at air power theorists who really got kind of an idea about what this platform could do. Hey, this airplane thing can really do some pretty extensive damage in the battlefield.
With these, they strafed ground troops, provided reconnaissance, and in spectacular battles, destroyed enemy aircraft.
Questions about, where should the airplane be applied? Should it be applied, way beyond the front line, towards the enemy's sort of vital strategic areas? Or should it be applied at the front line, right, where it can be the biggest service to those ground troops? Who's going to control this air power once it's actually in the air? Is it going to be, something that a forward army commander should have immediate control of? Or should it be something that is more centrally managed and thus can be more appropriately applied towards sort of these long-distance strategic vital targets? So these are defining sort of character moments where the Air Force defines itself as a service, right, as we try and figure out how to manage these particular debates.
She not only gets off ground, but stays aloft for 28 minutes, hits 2,500-foot altitude, and attains then fabulous speed of 93 miles an hour. Landing speed is mile a minute, considered perilous rate of speed in 1923.
I didn't know going into my dissertation when the start of TACP was. A common date, if you ask around enough, you're looking 1977, the birth of the 275X0 career field. It turns out TACP has a much deeper history than just the naming of a career field. I make the argument that TACP really starts in 1942. There was published the Field Manual 3135. And in Field Manual 3135, they define an air support party. An air support party officer accompanied by multiple enlisted men. His job is to integrate air power into a ground commander's scheme of maneuver with the help of guys who operate his radios, maintain his radios in his vehicle, and drive him around. Sounds a lot like the ROMAD.
Going all the way back to Kasserine Pass in World War II, the ground forward air controller, his purpose was to be able to advise the fighter pilots. And again, back in the days before we had things like laser-guided bombs and laser pointers, you had to be able to get that fighter pilot's eyes onto a target. And you only had a few minutes to be able to guide that pilot's eyes to what part of that massive amount of tree lines and shrubbery out there, where do you want him to drop those bombs?
This leads us up to Kasserine Pass, where we're still operating under this system.
Africa disaster for the Allies. Triumph then for Rommel.
The American forces get absolutely walloped by Rommel. There's no effective CAS. There's the divisions that are active, they have aircraft that show up, but it's pretty discombobulated. Nobody's really controlling it, and most of those aircraft shift to interdiction because they have no communication with their divisions up front.
Air Force headquarters and Army headquarters are completely disassociated with each other. They're not on talking terms. They don't plan together, they don't work together. And this battle occurs in Tunisia, and they're trying to, chase the Germans. Meanwhile, the British are kind of coming at it from the other side of Africa, right? So we're trying to compress the Germans, and we will fight this battle at Kasserine Pass. And the reality is that we just kind of weren't really prepared for what we were going to meet there. The U.S. Army moves through this particular pass, and the Germans are, in staked out positions. It was a scenario where air power would have specifically benefited the Army. Aircraft likely would have spotted some of the entrenchments that the Germans were in. Because they didn't, because they weren't necessarily coordinated, the U.S. Army moves through this particular pass. The Germans have the high ground, and it just ends up being this epic disaster. I mean, it's just an astronomical amount of American tanks that just get, blown out of the water. And of course, the Germans subsequently escape after that. So, in terms of our sort of real first foray on the European battlefront, Kasserine Pass actually kind of showcased how unprepared the United States Army and its associated Air Corps were for this particular type of combat.
The outcome of Kasserine Pass, it's often thought of as a really bad loss, a real first kick in the teeth for Americans. But at the end of the day, who won Kasserine Pass? Rommel overextended himself, was hammered by interdiction, had no logistics to stay in Kasserine Pass or to push forward, so he withdraws to Tunis. And the Americans take what then became famous at the time, Rover Joe. It's essentially the American version of Rover David, and we take that into Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, and then farther into Italy. We now go into Operation Husky using this Rover Joe system. Again, the Rover Joe is an air support party officer who is a pilot temporarily on assignment to an Army division. He coordinates with the division commander to request close air support, integrate air support into that ground commander scheme maneuver, and then he'll go where the battle is going to happen ahead of time in a Jeep with his enlisted ROMADs. This Rover Joe system in Sicily and Italy is so effective that they immediately start planning to use it in England as they plan to invade France in 1944. Bradley and Quesada come up with this system that they call armored column cover. And all the doctrine for what became TACP after World War II is based off of this armored column cover concept. So you take that Rover Joe concept, instead of sticking him out on an observation post, you put him in the lead vehicle of a tank column. And then when that tank column is highly engaged or expected to be highly engaged, they have around-the-clock 30-minute sorties of P-47s overhead. If there's anything in front of them, that Rover Joe in the armored column cover coordinates close air support right in front of them. They're not actively engaged. That Rover Joe would send the P-47s 20 miles ahead on the road looking for anything.
So this is the turning point. We start to actually develop some degree of communication between the Air Force and the Army, or the Air Corps and the Army. The commanders move quickly to move their headquarters actually close together. Believe it or not, they feel like they should actually be in the same building, and more conversations really start to happen. There's great quotes from Army commanders saying that air power was sort of the linchpin that enabled them to move quickly and safely across, different portions of the territory that they needed to move through. And so close air support or tactical air power played a vital central role in how the United States went to war.
That brings us into the Korean War itself. You have a strategic air command that is very powerful, and you have a tactical air command that has been enfeebled. And what is the Korean War? It is a conventional war where you're not using any strategic bombing. All of your air power is tactical. Essentially, we sent a Task Force Smith into Osan thinking that they could just hold off the North Koreans while we buffed up our forces in Korea. They get slaughtered. Everyone gets pushed back to the Pusan perimeter. And now it's like, okay, we have just gotten our asses kicked all the way down to Pusan. We're about to be kicked off the peninsula. We sent all these TACPs out, and we have these jets, the F-80, the F-82, the F-84, but close air support isn't really happening. We're in a serious threat of getting kicked off of the Korean Peninsula, and we finally start to develop a CAS system.
And this is where tactical air power really starts to come back into play. This is the evolution from Rover Joes to now an airborne FAC, a ground ALO, and an associated support member that happens to be an Air Force radio maintenance and operator troop. The Air Force dusts off, P-51s from World War II. Mind you, we're in a jet age now, right? So, these are slow moving aircraft comparatively, and we start prosecuting close air support missions with P-51s. Ironically enough, there was some major questions about who was going to basically provide the support for the ALOs on the ground in Korea. There was agreements even between the Air Force and the Army that the Army would be the one that would provide, what effectively became known as the ROMAD role. And so airmen stepped into the role. A lot of radio operators and radio maintenance troops basically started to fill that gap.
Finally at Pusan, we get co-located commanders to create this new concept called a JOC, Joint Operations Center. We now have the high brass of the Air Force and the Army talking, and they say, how do we get close air support into this situation to help us break out of this perimeter? They're reinventing the system where, hey, we have these TACPs down there. Let's send an officer down to go control close air support. They have all these enlisted guys that know the CAS system, and they can request close air support where it's needed, and the officers can control it. To furnish the tactical control squadron, you're taking radio operators, you're taking HVAC people, you're taking vehicle drivers, and you're putting them out in the field with the Army and telling them, hey, figure it out. Your job now is not to operate HVAC on an Air Force base. Your job is to go hang out in the freezing cold with the Army and help some ALO who's coming to hang out with you for 3 weeks control close air support. So you thought you signed up for the Air Force, you didn't want to go work with the Army, but here you are working with the Army.
We show up in Vietnam, 1965. The Air Force is not prepared to do this close air support mission.
The Air Force Tactical Air Control Units. These small, highly maneuverable O-1C aircraft are fittingly called bird dogs, in the sense that they seek out and pinpoint targets with smoke rockets as a guide to attack aircraft.
Once the target is marked, the bird dog must quickly make an exit to make way for the Phantom jets attacking with 750-pound bombs.
We're using off-the-shelf O1s and O2s. So you think about airmen and their motivation to be in the service at the time, a lot of them were not necessarily thinking, yeah, I want to go and, sling lead in Vietnam with an infantry unit. That's why I joined the Air Force, right? That's not the mentality kind of going forward. A lot of them would get off the plane, Jeeps would pull up and they would say, you, and you, and you. You're coming with me, you're gonna go over here with us, and you're gonna be part of this TACP unit. And no one really knew what that meant. And then they start roping in these 304s and 293s, the nomenclature for radio operators and radio maintainers, and they start using them as they had in Korea in kind of this ROMAD role. ROMADs become kind of this jack of all trades, right? They show up there with no training. Anything that they can get is pretty much done in-house. And it's really training from other ROMADs that have been there before them and saying, hey, this is what it looks like when the Army is going to fire their artillery. And when they're doing that, you need to be doing this, right? So this is all OJT. They're on-the-job training that is out on the front lines, learning this type of stuff live.
Roger. 81 should be able to see that as well, isn't it, Wade? Let's get them on there. Over.
Hey, look, I can't get a grid out of bird stay.
Okay, look, here are the two TACs. You see them?
Yes, sir.
You see where that smoke is?
Sure.
The smoke landed about 300 meters, right where that big tree is out there. 300 to 400 meters. Southeast.
Close air support was not something that people really wanted to go and do, because as the Air Force is really struggling with this manning problem, and pilots are going towards ALO duties that they don't want to go and do, there's this crop of ROMADs sort of over here in the corner, right, that no one's really paying attention to, and they're out there adapting, self-training, embedding with their Army units, and they're starting to control, right? These guys, despite the fact that it was, largely illegal at the time for them to do it, they're out there doing it, right? There's great narratives too about guys who were out there controlling under their associated ALO's call sign, right? So they were saying that they were somebody else out there and controlling, because that was what was necessary to go and do. High-level service interaction is happening on the ground level by some junior enlisted guy, like that's not the way that the Air Force would typically see how to do its business, especially between, for joint service coordination. The problem is that they're not getting promoted, right? So the Air Force has a manning problem with its pilots. And it's about to have a manning problem with all its enlisted force, because the enlisted force says, hey, look, if I'm not going to get promoted because this is not an official career field, and promoting against my peers in my normal career field is not possible because I'm not actually really trained in that, I'm trained in this TACP thing, then I'm going to get out. So all of these people with these really unique skill sets and loads of experience, working in a joint service environment, they're about to punch. And so the Air Force in 1975 does this really wide manning study. And this is really kind of the catalyst behind the start of the career field, is trying to solve these sort of like fundamental manning problems. So, talk about kind of this independence mindset. It's like it's on full display right there.
I came in the Air Force in 1968, May 22nd, and they said they had a job in electronics, ground radio maintenance. And then I went to Korea in 71, and that's when I got introduced to the ROMAD career field. I kind of liked it. I liked driving the Jeep all over the countryside and working on the radios that I had been trained to work on. And so it was a fun job. We would get on the radio and we'd be sitting out there and I'd be talking to the fighters, and stuff, just calmly, routinely, reading the non-lines and all that kind of stuff, and just having fun of it. It was like a game, more or less, Around April of 77, they made me sign some paperwork in processing, 2096, I think they called it back then, and I asked them what that was for, and they said it's a change of AFSC. And I said, to what? And they said, TACP. And I said, what the hell is that? I mean, we knew we were bastard children, we knew that. And the TACPs have always been a bastard child of the Air Force and the Army, so, neither one of them wanted us, but we were having fun, so we didn't care. There was a lot of animosity there towards the Air Force. A lot of people didn't like it. We had senior NCOs that refused to go to a fort that were, home based at an air base. And there was a lot of legality issues came up. People got out, people tried to sue the Air Force. And there was a lot of disruption in the career field when it first started. And they said, well, we don't have any money for you. We couldn't get any money to fix stuff. And we couldn't get anything. We had to borrow stuff from the Army, pretty much. And so, yeah, it was a struggle just to get equipment. I was devastating to the troops at the career field. I was like, man, they just don't like us, do they? They didn't realize the capability we were trying to provide at the time. We were just a thorn to them because they had to provide us, billeting and housing and all that kind of stuff, and they're not their troops. I said, why are we giving all this stuff to these Air Force people? Let them go to an Air Force base. It was a struggle back then. And for those guys that really liked it, they saw through that and figured it's going to come about eventually, which it did, obviously.
United States paratroopers have invaded Grenada with helicopter gunships.
So there was a large push at the time in the early 80s where we don't need the TAC air control party because all of that can be done by combat control and they'll just take over everything. And the TAC air control community said, no, you're missing the important point. The important point is not controlling the airstrike. The important point is, are we serving the ground force commander the way that we need to, which was the history of, don't forget your history. Forget your history, you're doomed to fail. So we kept that point, and that led to an idea of how are we going to mature this career field to take us beyond where we are and what we're doing. And I think Grenada was a very big part of that, because the folks that went into Grenada, those that jumped in and did that, the 82nd Airborne guys that even did the air lands, all the support to the other governmental agencies that we gave while we were on the island, all of that served to show that we serve a unique purpose that you're not going to get anywhere else. And when the shit hit the fan and they needed people to be able to support on the ground, under fire, the TACP guys were right there.
Some people went down to the local gas station or the library or whatever and got a tourist map to see where the hell Grenada was at. We went to a big hangar for a briefing from Colonel Taylor, the battalion commander, and there's literally hundreds of piles of munitions. There's a pile right here of ammo cans, couple of laws, stack of hand grenades, you know, some claymores. And the sergeant major up there said, all right, cover down on a pile. I said, what? I can't even lift that shit. So everybody's lining up on these piles. You know, we're just one of the Army troops now, you know. So Colonel Taylor stands up and he gives his little hoo-ah brief and all that kind of stuff. And he says, gentlemen, I want you to understand one thing. This is not an exercise. You have congressional authority to shoot to kill. And that place erupted. The whole ceiling just vibrated, you know? And everybody's grabbing hand grenades and grabbing bullets and shoving them in their pockets. And I pick up this law and I'm looking at it because I don't even think I've ever fired one before. And I'm looking at it and this ranger says, hey, Air Force, you don't want that, do you? And I said, no. And he grabbed it out of my hand and stuffed it in his rucksack. And I'm like, man, these guys are serious. So we just had our Prick 66 radio. We had a 25 radio we took with us as well, and a couple of batteries each, and a normal basic load of ammunition. You know, little Gal 5s is what we carried. And we had 2 ammo pouches of 30-round magazines, and that's all we took. I said, I've got all my firepower somewhere else, you know? I don't need all this, and you guys better protect me, is what I'm thinking. So we loaded up into 7 C-130s, and I was in the first aircraft, Alpha Company, and so we actually jumped in there then. And then we got radio reports. We're getting these little slips coming through. Marines didn't make it in there. The SEALs didn't make it in there. And now we're going in there with blind. There's no beacon on the ground because CCT didn't get the beacon in there. So we're going in pretty much blind. But fortunately, we had an MC-130, which has the high-speed navigation stuff on it, you know. We had maps, we had good maps. What we didn't have was the targeting information on those maps. We didn't have good lat longs on them. And so what we had to do, we coordinated with the AC-130 guys ahead of time, and we put target numbers or reference numbers on the maps. And we used those numbers as references for targets. And that's how we did it. We didn't have any high-speed shit going on, nothing. We just had you know, talking to the AC-130. Hey, I got a target. You know where 26 is on the map? Roger that. Well, you're about 300 yards northeast of that and drop something. Okay, we got you. And that's pretty much where it was. It was fly by the night, you know, seat of your pants type stuff. After action reports, you know, the lessons learned, more radios, better quality radios. We could have had better radios. There were more technically advanced radios in those 66s back then that we didn't have access to. Combat Control probably had them, but we didn't have them. It didn't even dawn on me until one time, Major Roper, we're back at Shaw, and he's telling me then, he said, you know, you kind of made history here. And I said, well, I don't know, I just did my job, you know, that's what we're supposed to do. He says, no, you don't understand, Scotty. He was a big, big believer in the TACP career field. He was a Raven fac, I guess, over in Vietnam, and he used enlisted guys flying with him back then. And he said, you were the first TACP to call an a live airstrike in combat. You understand that? Okay, there was others there, you know. He said, no, there was 2 others there, yes. But you called in the first ones. You're the one that did it. I went, well, do I get a promotion? And I did, actually, I got a step promotion, so that was kind of cool. He says, you've created an environment that's gonna grow into something really great. He said, you were part, not only part, but you were part of that, getting a firm grip on what the TACPs can do. You've shown it, you've proven it, and now we're gonna grow on that. And because of what we did here in October, it's gonna change this career field. It's gonna advance it to God knows what.
So I equate it to similarly to the way that the Navy leverages the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is necessary for the Navy because they have to leverage the land or the surface domain in order for the ocean to work. So like you can't just have ships without having some humans on the earth to do things, especially in a combat environment. We function to the Air Force in a lot of ways similarly to the value the Marine Corps provides to the Navy. We're like orphans of divorced parents in some cases. Like we kind of live and do a lot of work with the Army and we love them, but they're not like our real dad. we're sort of like a weird topic for the Air Force. We're like, yeah, that's that guy, and sometimes I see him if I got to go to a leadership course, but we don't totally fit there. And so the necessity to have a healthy subculture and community in that, because we're what's called a geographically separated unit most of the time. The Air Force calls it a GSU. So we live on an island.
Now the guys that are coming in, all volunteer force. You know, it's not the Vietnam leftovers. We got guys that are like smart coming in the door. So it's been a complete transition from kind of meh back here all the way up to the super, PhD level guys we've got. I mean, we got enlisted guys passing the fighter weapons school. Holy crap.
When I left the career field, the individuals that I was serving with, the young people that were coming in behind me, they were a completely different breed. They were all very strong, they all were very level-headed, they all wanted to serve and to be able to succeed, so they were very focus-driven, as opposed to late 70s, early 80s, do your job, do as little as you need to, I'm here to drink beer and jump out of airplanes. And now you move it on to, now you've got guys that are sitting there trying to design the first simulator on a desktop. Can we make a simulator that lets you control CAS? Just a completely different world than all I do is do PT and go to the range. As the career field was maturing, we didn't have that sense of community. It was a bunch of different guys all over the place. You had your Airborne, they had air assault, you had the Ranger guys, you had the guys armor, you had the leg infantry guys, we were all disparate. Right? So there was nothing that brought us together as a community. We had no rallying symbol, if you will. And in 82, 83, it really did begin to an aspect of we need to develop something to put on our berets. We need to develop a symbol. I need to design something on cloth that's going to be on your beret all the time. Chief Fiscus recommended that, base it on heraldry. Go find symbols, go find emblems. So I sat there with a list of paper on a yellow legal pad. I wrote down everything that we did, that a sword would easily be able to translatable into firepower, universal symbol, lightning bolt for communications. We can go anywhere. And it doesn't matter if it's Operation Brimfrost and it's -60 and I'm up in Alaska and then 3 months later I'm in Egypt for Bright Star. This idea of us being worldwide deployable, okay, omnidirectional compass. So there's just all these little things and I'm trying to fit them all together and they do not fit. Nothing is working correctly. And I'm looking around at all the Green Berets with their flash and their crest embolizing, what special forces team they were with, and that's it. We need a flash, a cloth flash to go behind that metallic crest. We got air and we got ground. We have blue, we have green. That just naturally led into an interlocking symbol that now shows that we are joined, interlocked together permanently. That perfectly fed into, we can never forget that we're U.S. Air Force. Once it finally got approved, which is a whole nother story, that really did wind up being, what I think anyway, that's a good sense of community.
So I get to basic training and I came in open general, so I had no guaranteed job. And they give you a little assessment, and you fill it out and I like to camp, I like to hike, silly stuff that somehow they put in a calculator and I get this thing called TACP, Tactical Air Control Party. And my TI at the time looked at it and said, I have no idea what this is, but the package had a airborne, parachute on it. And I go, I think I could jump out of planes. I'm a little afraid of heights, but I think I could swing that. Went up to Hunter Army Airfield at 1st Ranger Battalion. Got my jump master wings, got my military freefall jump master. Had been there for about a year when we got bravoed for Panama for Operation Just Cause.
Fellow citizens, last night I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama.
At the time, Noriega was acting pretty bad. He was a bad actor against the United States, and some service members were killed down in Panama. So that kind of set the stage for the invasion of Panama and scooping up Noriega on the 20th of December, 1989. Jump on the 141s and off we go. So we jump, and course, we got a green light a little bit too early, and not unlike any other time where, you know, it was just, I think they were a little bit anxious to get out of that flight pattern and get the heck out of there because they were taking fire. You know, a couple of the 141s up front. And 500 feet might seem pretty low, but when the tracers are flying around, and there were a few tracers coming up through the sky, not necessarily aimed at anybody or anything, but you could tell there was fire on the horizon. AC-130s did preparatory fires on some of the barracks and other things. I think I had my M1950 undone and my weapon almost out of the M1950 before I hit the ground. So I was locked, loaded, ready to rock. We dropped in the approach lights, and in those approach lights there were fences, certainly outside of the fences in the military Tucuman airfield. So I get up, throw my ruck over the first fence, and I climb up the fence, and sure enough, I rip my frickin' pants. And back in those days, hardly any of us wore any underwear to escape that, you know, the jungle rot. So I am free balling big time. From right there where the stronghold is all the way up the crack of my ass, everything is wide open, so I am swinging. Cross another fence. And by this time, I've got 3 other Rangers with me. And all those guys are tabbed, I'm not tabbed. And they're going, all right, Sergeant, what do we do next? And I'm like, oh fuck, you picked the Air Force guy? At least I've got a radio. I'm communicating with the AC-130, I think it was Kilo 01, who's flying, I can hear him flying overhead. We've got little birds. Every now and then they'd do a bump up and come in on approach, and they had uniform radios as well, so I was communicating with the little birds. So we're getting ready to go in towards our blocking position, and our company, Bravo Company, was responsible for the perimeter security. So we had a BP weapons platoon. They're assembling on it. I see some civilians walking on the bridge, and we had a problem. So we either went up and over the bridge, which was all lit up, or we crossed this canal. And they're all like, what do we do? And I said, well, let's try this canal. So I jump in the water and find that, with having that no underwear and a ripped pants, I got a little chilly quickly, but I go over my head rapidly and I'm like, all right, back up, we're not doing that, because I didn't know how well those guys could swim. I can swim. Ditched and donned that. In the meantime, this duster, it's about a 73 red and white duster, comes pulling up over the bridge towards the blocking position. Well, most of the company was assembled at that time. What I didn't know is, I was talking to the AC-130, what I didn't know is on the Fox mic, the fire support NCO of the battalion, he was talking to them on Fox mic, and our FSO and my ALO Gary Luck were both knocked unconscious. You know, so they were concussed during the jump, and they were kind of out of commission. Back up a little bit. So these guys in the duster run over a parachute that was sitting on the road. Well, it gets caught up in their tire. They jump out. Now it's midnight, and they start pulling out a parachute. And I could see them. I'm probably 60, 70 yards away. The BP, the block position guys, are within 10 yards, 10, 15 meters. Some of them I could see them standing up. And they didn't know we were there. We had 4 of us on the other side of this, you know, in defilade, thank goodness. Because when the AC-130 said, hey, there's 2 guys that got out of the vehicle, Petey cleared them hot, and they smoked 2 105 rounds in. Well, the block position thought they were RPGs, so they opened fire. And all these rounds are going over our heads, and I'm like, son of a bitch, just don't let us die by friendly fire. So we kind of hunkered down, and I felt like, please, Kevlar, just, you wanted to stretch that thing all the way over your body. And but I called the AC-130 and said, hey, knock it off. You have friendlies, you know, super danger close. And we had about 2 or 3 guys wounded. One took some shrapnel in the shin, another took a piece of shrapnel right in the ass. So we yelled the running password, Bulldog, Bulldog, hey, you got friendlies over here, after they ceased fire, so they didn't get trigger happy. And so we run up on the bridge, and over the bridge we do a link up. And they definitely smoked those 2 guys. They were in the wrong place, wrong time, and fucked with the wrong people, and ended up KIA.
It wasn't until the Gulf War, 90-91 timeframe, that we had enlisted guys on the mic controlling airstrikes against the Iraqi Republican Guard Although they only fought for 100 hours of combat, it was those guys that set the table and proved that enlisted operators could do the job of a rated officer, although they did not have any cockpit time. But we showed that we could learn the skills, we could understand how the weaponeering worked, all the different mechanics involved with ballistics, as we call it, bang-bang guidance with some of the Paveway 2 bombs, how they fly through the air. We learned all that stuff and we proved we could do it.
When they couldn't see, being the eyes, basically the eyes and ears of those JTACs that were duking it out in the Sandstorm and plotting targets for them and being able to pass that on to them and say, east of your position, you've got a bridge, there's, 5 BMPs, on the east side of that bridge, and, here's your fighter, here's your stack, here's your whatever, put some munitions down for them, and they would end up doing the controls and schwacking targets that they couldn't see. And quite frankly, there's no way they could have, gleaned those coordinates had it not been for that air power and the likes of the ISR platforms.
What the guys did in Desert Storm, their heroics with the Highway of Death and some other things that they were able to do there set the table for the ETAC generation that I was a part of, Iraq invasion, early stages of Afghanistan, which then set the table for the JTAC weapons school that I was very fortunate to be the initial cadre for.
TACP is a career field, a job. JTAC is a qualification.
TACP side, equipment, radios, vehicles, reports, forms, all that kind of stuff. The JTAC is more specific, and it's all about controlling airstrikes, understanding commander's intent, understanding laws of conflict, all those kinds of things are what that JTAC is. So really our graduate degree is that JTAC, also getting the aircraft and controlling and directing them on targets that ground commander needs. So I always saw it as a graduation from, really good TACP, now I have to learn how to be a JTAC.
To be a proper JTAC, you have to think in 4 dimensions. You got to be able to, at any particular time, turn around and go, jets there, helicopters are right there, they're firing. Any ricochet is going to go that way, aircraft's coming in this way, ricochet is going to go that way, and field artillery is coming right down the middle. The frag patterns are going this direction. The worst thing you can have is an aircraft flying over getting fragged by your own guys.
At the end of the day, we're here to take you straight out of basic training and turn you into the guy that puts bombs on target, and that's what we're going to do. Comes down to it, the key to making it through this course is your motivation. If you keep that positive attitude and positive outlook, taking each day at a time, you will succeed at the TACP schoolhouse.
And so there's just so much to it that if you don't really become great at that, you're never going to be a great JTAC. You're going to actually be dangerous. Guys go through advanced skills training. Not only do they study the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, they go through those drills as a team first. So they are not going into it for the first time with a Ranger battalion or with a Special Forces ODA. And then they'll go off to their first duty station and they'll go through SFAUC or SFARDIC, which are these Special Forces qualifications to teach you room clearance and other very specific things that only a special operator would get those skills in doing. And so as much as we try to say we're pretty good at it, until we get some of those quals alongside our Army or Joint SOF partners, we're not going to claim that we are certified. They're not necessarily going to trust your word for it. They're going to want to see that you've rehearsed with them, gone through that training with them, and until they bless you off, their training officer or their commander blesses you off to say, yes, you meet our standards, we're pretty good at it, and then we get almost as good as in some cases as good as the Rangers or the Green Berets or whatever element happens to be, as good as they are. The burden and privilege of being a JTAC, it comes down to the training. And a lot of guys are on the range so much, they get a little jaded and tired of training so much. You realize how much it costs as well to train a JTAC. You know, people always talk about what it costs to train a pilot, and it's in the millions of dollars per fighter pilot. It's the same can be said for training a JTAC. It's very expensive. So when I think about in 27 years how much money has been spent to train me, it's flattering that, you know, we get to train as much as we do. I don't think any other military on earth can say they've trained as much as we have.
We had psych docs that were involved in it, so there was a psychological assessment. We would have guys that would come in, just crush it, physically, great leader, do everything, and their psychological assessment they'd be like, hey, they're not a match for this going forward. So I would have to look at that and go like, okay, well, I would talk to the psych doc, well, what's wrong with this individual? Well, they've got this in their past and this in their past, and they've got, they were arrested for this, or a DUI, they're arrested for a fight, and to me, good or bad, that was an endearing characteristic. I wanted that. I wanted that guy with a fight in him at the Rangers. That's the guy I needed. That's the guys he's going to be working with. I need an aggressive individual. So while psychologically that might not have fit into the Air Force's picture, it fit perfectly into the fact that I'm sending a guy downrange, every 180 days to put bombs on target and shoot people in the face. So I don't need a passive individual. I need a little bit of aggression. Let me manage his aggression, but let him come over. So there was a lot of conversations back and forth where I would tell, we're going to get a pass, and fortunately, a lot of times I was sitting on the board, and I would talk to the commander of the assessment and selection, say, I want this guy. And fortunately, they listened to me. And those individuals, that a lot of them we were told shouldn't have come over, performed flawlessly and were some of our best operators we had on the battlefield.
I go into the recruiting office, and just so happens I look at their magazine rack, and there's a picture of a TACP named Tommy King on the cover of this magazine. And I pick it up, I look at it, I read what this person does, and I turn it around and looked at the recruiter. I said, this is what I want to do. He said, are you sure? I said, that's what I want to do. I can go to Airborne school, I can wear a beret, I can be in the Air Force, I can work with the Army just a little bit. This is what I want. He's like, okay. What I didn't realize at the time is that was a career field that was already undermanned, and they needed people to be in that career field. So the state of the career field in the 90s, it's training, it's hurry up and wait, like the Army says. So really trying to sharpen your skills in everything that you were expected to do, day to day, from a garrison perspective to, hey, operationally, these are the things I need to know. So we had a lot of time just to go and, rinse and repeat and do things over and over and over, really just to sharpen your skills.
Another historical fact, I would say there was 4 TACP cultures in the 90s, and before that as well. You had your mechanized infantry culture, you had your infantry culture, you had your airborne, and you had your SOF. And so these were very distinct and unique as far as my memory growing up. And I remember being at an armor unit and wanted to go to airborne school and go to Fort Bragg. My NCOs were like, why do you want to go to an airborne unit? Those guys don't know how to call cast, they just jump. And so that's like a definite rift, between the different cultures. Before 9/11, a lot of TACPs in my circle, we were kind of not happy with the career field in our ignorance, because there's nothing going on. It's like, practicing for football and not be able to play football. So I grew up in the 90s, we were the bastard's children, we had no money. I remember getting a pair of aviator glasses from the supply place at the Air Force Base, and I thought we were cool. And a little finger light, that's what we had. A little flick knife, and man, I got some cool gear. So think about Vietnam era LBEs, elbow flashlights, old K-pots, thick sleeping bags that, take up all your rucksack space. That was the TACP career field. We had zero money. We're gonna, at least for me in Germany, we're gonna fight the Russians at the Fulda Gap and, be good at your job, understand the Russian doctrine, and know your radios.
I joined in 1991 during the Gulf War. There were a lot of cuts that were starting to happen. The military was downsizing, and money was very, very scarce. Like no money. Our gear literally was, a lot of our flak vests were from Vietnam. We had older helmets. We had PVS-5 for MVGs, few and far between. They just transitioned prior to the Gulf War from Jeeps to Humvees. That was probably the newest thing we had. We were in an old kind of rundown Army maintenance bay where we worked out of. And our annual operating budget for, I want to say we had about 15 folks there, including support, was about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Our training, we were fortunate in that aspect where I was at. We had bombing ranges close by. So me being a young, what they called ROMAD, radio operator, maintainer, and driver, assigned to a terminal attack, an enlisted terminal attack controller at that time, I was able to get a lot of training, which was great because it was in our backyard. Didn't cost us anything to do. We were fortunate to have F-16s up at New Mexico Air National Guard, the TACOs. They were actually A7s when I started, transitioned to F-16s. And then we also had the 111s out of Cannon. So we were doing CAS all the time, which I think was probably the most beneficial for my career. I got a lot of exposure to being a terminal attack controller at a very early age.
I was in Korea on 9/11. It was middle of the night over there when that happened on September 11th. And it was very clear to everyone that we were going to go to war after that. And I wanted to be a part of it. So I started asking my supervisors at that time about what my options were. And we talked about pararescue, combat control, and TACP, which is when I first learned about it. And back then in 2001, things were not as well known as they are now. In fact, my supervisor explained it to me that I was going to have to get out of the Air Force and go into the Army. And I said, yeah, let's do that. I just followed instruction. Showed up to Hurlburt Field, went through tech school, got my assignment to Fort Benning. And as I said, that was a great place. It's a great place for anybody to cut their teeth, but at that time when Iraq and Afghanistan were both kicking off, it was a really remarkable place to be because of the combat deployment opportunities and also the training opportunities are there, which is really the center of, training for the Army.
"9/11 was the worst thing that happened to our nation in many years, obviously. And it sounds kind of uncouth, if you will, but it was the best thing that happened to the career field. Now we have the latest and greatest of technology. All the tools I've been training for all these years were not the tools I had in Afghanistan in 2001. And so, young E5, I get to Afghanistan, they say, hey, these radios that you've been using all your career, you don't have those. Here's a Prick 117. First time I saw it was in country. Hey, the devices that you use to find where you at, and so you can also, use a laser rangefinder to find out what the enemy. Well, here's a Garmin E-Trex from REI. So talk about a steep learning curve, trying to figure this out. And then another step further, we had B-52s that are from the 1950s and 1960s dropping brand new JDAMs. We had Prick 117 satellite radios on guys' backpacks and riding horseback. And so the compare and contrast between the old and new was, I don't think it's been a war that had the old and new that was meshed together like that and was successful that I can think of.
We get down to Bagram, get established, and that's when we're told that, hey, there's gonna be this operation and we're gonna get to be a part of it. We're going into this valley. The soft guys are gonna be moving in with the Northern Alliance to help those guys establish credibility as the fighting force there and to legitimize the Afghan government and everything. What we were gonna expect was 150 to 200 dudes, foreign fighters with their families that want to surrender. So there's probably not going to be any shooting. And as a JTAC, usually I'd have another guy with me as my ROMAD, but since nothing's going to happen, I didn't need one. And I remember while we were flying in, there was a little bit of confusion. They let us know they're going to test fire, and they test fired. Then after a while, somebody started shooting again, I thought. And from the back of the Chinook I was in, I could see the Apaches that were with us, but they left. Are we okay? Is everything fine? That's not, we see some trachers going up in the air. I'm we hit the ground and we're going. Everybody gets out, the Chinooks leave. There's an explosion and we take cover. I didn't have a map, by the way. I didn't have a map because somebody decided that only people in leadership positions should have maps. The guys all the way to my front, they start firing at somebody. I didn't know what the sound of bullets being fired at me was. We had a lot of guys that had fought in Somalia in our unit, and one of them was finally get down, dumbass, you're getting shot at. Oh, so I go find a little dip in the ground and dip my ruck down and I get behind it. My brain can't make sense of everything that's happening, so I'm just sitting down here behind my rucksack with my weapon. I see one dude, and he's shooting, and I'm just he's shooting at our dudes, and he's about 300 yards away, and he's up high. So I started shooting at him. He would duck down, and he popped up, and eventually, I guess he saw me. And now I got it in auto, and I'm doing bursts at him. And I noticed that he had a pattern. He would duck down for a few seconds, so I eventually just 1-2 and shot. And he stood back up, and it just saw a little poof, quick little pop, and he went back down. I didn't know, like, I don't know, like, did I kill him? Is he whatever? Did I even hit him? Did I just scare him? And the time that we landed until that happened, it must have been like 20 minutes, but it was like 3. So now I'm getting my radio out and getting my comms all set up. I was trying to talk to the helicopters, the Apaches that were flying around. And I'm facing the enemy off to the east. To my south, there's explosions. There was an explosion right behind me. I don't remember flipping over, but I do remember, like, I woke up. So I'm laying on my back, and I realized that everybody else was running away. So I assumed when that happened, from here down, I'm gone. But I drank a lot of water on the helicopter, like a whole big liter of water, and I had to pee real bad. You know, like, my ears are ringing, my whole body hurts. I'm clearly from here down gone because nobody's even coming back to get me. So I had to pee. So I just did. I could feel it. And I was like, all right, maybe it's just like phantom stuff, whatever. But then, like, I don't want to look down because then if I see any injuries, I'm going to feel them. But I could feel it running down my pant leg. So I start to, like, pick my feet up slowly, and I see that, like, my legs are working, and I'm actually okay, except for that I just, you know, peed my pants, and nobody's gonna believe that I did it because I thought I was dying or anything I did, but whatever. And I tried to get my radio, unfortunately had been disabled by enemy fire, so there was nobody left to contact, and I saw another Apache, like, flying north to south in the valley, and, you know, knowing how they operate, I could see, like, the gun was pointed at me. So I'm, like, waving, so they see me, and they, like, roll out. And he comes back in, and he starts attacking where I was getting shot at from, so I just get up and start hauling ass. And I run up over where everybody else is, and I'm yelling, you know, so they don't shoot me by accident as I'm coming over into the, like, bowl where they are. All I got is my rifle. So I get over there, and I run down to where I see Sergeant McCabe, and something was going on with his radio, he said, and so I started tinkering with it, and we got it working. And he's like, okay, do you have your PSN 11? And my GPS, the old plugger, and I was like, no, it's out there, but you got yours. And he's like, no, I gave it to our fire support officer, and when they started taking fire where he was, he dropped it. Understandable. So I was like, okay, well, I got this little Garmin right here. We're not using that because somebody else had problems. So then I was like, well, somebody's gonna have to go get it. And I was just an E4, so I understood what that meant. Plus, I was in a little bit better shape than he was. So I was like, all right, let me go find Captain Taylor again. Find Captain Taylor, the fire support guy. I'm like, hey, where did you drop it at? And he's like, it's near a signal panel and like a skid co. I think if you go over the hill, it's gonna be like that way. At this point, like, the direct fire had calmed down, but the indirect fire was they're still shooting at us, and they had already hit our mortar tube, so we couldn't shoot back at them. So we had no effective way to return fire to where they were, or even really, like, to know where they were shooting from. I go up to the top of the ridge where everybody was, and I see this little saw gunner. I was like, hey man, I'm gonna need you to cover me. I gotta run out there, and if you could just, you know, do a little suppressing fire wherever you've seen guys shooting from. I gotta go out there and I gotta get something. He's like, okay, I'm like, on 3, I'm gonna go. He's like, all right, I'm ready. He's got his thing, he's looking through his scope, and he's braced in and he's ready. He's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And I just start hauling ass. Like, I can see where it is, and I run down there. I probably got halfway down there, and if it occurs to me, this guy's not shooting. But I'm hearing the, like, whips and snaps and cracks, and I'm getting shot at the whole time I'm running down here. I see the thing, it's right under there. I grab it, and I don't know why I grabbed the signal panel too. I grabbed them both, and I'm running. I'm just getting shot at, like, the whole time. So I get back around, I'm like, all right, I got it. So we start, working up coordinates and talking to guys about where they're seeing fire coming from, and they're like, on top of this ridge line, it's like 450 meters away. We do the range calc. I'm like, all right, we got it. Let me get on the radio and try to call people, but nobody's answering. So you're like, hey, this is white lighting, having a flight emergency, any aircraft respond. Hey, this is Squid 11 responding to you on guard. Go with the nature of your emergency. And I was just like, can you push the TAT 81, which is my net? And he's like, yeah. So he does. It's like, hey, it's me again. This is white lightning on TAT 81. I am currently, my unit is pinned down. I'm not sure what our situation is exactly, but we're taking a lot of fire. We have casualties. And somebody said something about maybe the enemy's getting ready to attack us. So, like, we could possibly be receiving a large attack soon. I need you to say your aircraft type and ordnance, because I was expecting, we're just gonna roll right into the violence. And I swear to God, this guy says, I'm a P3 Orion, We have like 4 9mm and 60 rounds on board. I don't know what we can do, but we'll do what we can. And that made me laugh. This guy just said they can have some pistols and they'll shoot out their windows. That's not going to be really helpful. Like, all right. So I was like, could you please relay our situation to the AWACS, back to the KAOC and everything. The B-52 checks in with me on my net. His call sign was Trimmer 61 or 62. I was like, we'll be there in 20 minutes. Oh man, 20 minutes. Like, can you go faster? We're going as fast as we can. Roger that. We plan on hitting that ridge line that we think all the fire's coming from. We're going to hit that first. We got a B-52 come in, and he's got 27 500-pound bombs and 12 GBU-31s, GPS guided 2,000 pounders. And I wind up being the guy that says cleared hot. This B-52, he went and he attacked from south to north. That first thing was all 27 of those 500-pound bombs because he didn't have the play time. So it was like, let's do what we can as fast as possible. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting maybe like 5 at a time so we could hit it multiple times. But so my first airstrike in combat ever was 27 500-pound bombs 450 meters away. And they hit the top of that ridge line perfectly. All of them hit everywhere I wanted it to be. So I felt really good. I was just, all you hear is rocks and shrapnel landing, and it's totally quiet. And for a brief moment, it was like, yeah, we got him. And then we started taking fire again. So it's like, what do we do now? And it's just like, we're gonna do 12 2,000 pounders on the backside of that ridge line because maybe they're taking cover there. My next airstrike after that was with some Strike Eagles. Strike Eagles come in immediately and they can actually see the guys in their hole shooting at us. They had just hit this one trench network where it had like a mortar tube and a couple of firing positions, blew it up, good secondaries. That gave us time to, a lot of our fire settled down, so we got to consolidate, and there was a lot of helping move the wounded, redistributing ammo, just moving around doing stuff like that. And it was just, it was that all day. At that point, I think we might have had 26 wounded dudes, but no fatalities. And we got evac'd out, and we get back to Bagram, and we land, and we get out. And when I walk back into the tent, everybody's talking about everything that happened. And our company commander and a few other dudes are sitting around the stove, and they're talking. When I walk in, one of them is like, that's the guy. I'm like, that dude, those airstrikes, that's why we're here right now. That was pretty cool.
When I got to the Special Forces Group, 3rd Special Forces Group, which was after the Det 1 piece, their mentality was a little bit different, just how they operate. So you could see a level of maturity, for me at least, with Special Forces soldiers, as opposed to when I was just in your day-to-day conventional type of organizations. And so you would start drawing from that. The preparation, in my opinion, was different because in the Special Forces folks expect, you're supposed to know. And that was almost the mentality, you should know these things. And then when I get to the Rangers, so the training aspect really ramped up. The expectation is a lot different, from equipment being lodged, from responsibility, from being a part of the team. That was the first time for me where I was working with my Army counterparts where I was a teammate. They didn't see me as Airman Lindsay or Sergeant Lindsay Air Force. They saw me as a teammate. And because they see you as a teammate, it gets to the point of what, I don't want to fail these folks. And there was trust, there was respect across the board where it became an expectation. I was a part of 3rd Ranger Battalion. I was a teammate of those soldiers, and it felt good.
An Air Force guy living with the Army and being more, we're kind of purple, you might say. We always made an effort, and everything that we did was to out-Army the Army and everything that they did. When our senior NCOs walk in a room, we expected our airmen to stand up, just like the Army would do. We expected when they stand and talk to a senior NCO that they stand at parade rest, just like an Army guy would do. So we tried our best to inherit and kind of ingrain some of that Army culture into the way that we did things in a squadron. It did make us stand out from a regular Air Force guy because when they would go to PME and stuff, they would act like Army guys, which we were kind of proud of.
You trained on all of your systems and as a team. And so you planned on having an entire team with you with a radio pallet and all of these other pieces of equipment. But when you went over to the Rangers, you were training and preparing to be the only one there with no one to help you, no one to fix your gear, no extra gear to be had. And so it was a much different mindset, and it really emphasized the importance of knowing how every single piece of equipment you have on you works, how to troubleshoot it, how to field repair it, how every single part of the CAS process works, how to troubleshoot it, how to repair it, because it would be on you to integrate all of those things, and you would be doing it on your own during a time of crisis. Nobody ever wants the JTAC to do what their job is when things are going great or when there's lots of time to spare. It's always under stress.
As a leader throughout my career, if I didn't have confidence in the TACP, that guy was getting traded out. If someone was gonna leave quickly, it would be a TACP who showed up who couldn't do his job, because that's how important they are. Because for the most part, no one else can do it. I can pick up a radio and I can call in a fire mission in a really shitty situation with the bare minimum lines. I can do that. That's not controlling. That's like, saving your ass in a really bad situation. But what a TACP has to be able to bring to the fight is a much different level of expertise, much different level of problem solving and being creative and forward thinking and anticipating what's gonna happen, 30, 45 minutes from now. As the situation is developing, I know that the TACP, the JTAC is working through the scenarios, and he's gonna give me option A, B, and C, and then it's, the ground force commander's decision to make, which route they go with. Confidence is huge with those guys.
My decisions really come with big consequences, right? I dropped a 500-pound bomb 58 meters from a SF team, right? Like, how close is that? If you actually really think about it, I can throw a football that far. I'll maybe kick it, but that's super close. In order for them to trust you with their lives, you have to be personable. You have to let them trust you. And that comes with knowledge. That comes with just decision making, right? Some of the things the Air Force did hook us up with is I knew ROE better than even the commanders that I worked for, right? The rules of engagement, I was very well briefed and knew how to maybe push them.
Neutralizing targets, making things go boom. That's what we all want to see, right? Smoke and blowing stuff up on the battlefield. But I think when you bring people home, they get to go home to families, that's the value of what we do. Because it's more than CAS, it's the medevac. It's the training and being able to treat, right, some of the basic life-saving stuff.
We had a couple choke points that we were setting up, platoons were setting up, and we had an OP that myself, Ray, and some snipers were gonna be on, and it took us a haul to get up there, and nothing happened that night, and we're walking back. Vehicle's supposed to pick us up. Of course, they don't show up. Had to walk back to 7K, get back to the fob. Sun's coming up. Ray's swapping out batteries, putting batteries on charge, fast packing meal, filling up his water, and Talking Seal runs in and says, hey, Captain Trahan needs you in the talk. We have some dismounts around a known cache site. We had the raid camera up on a mast, and they spotted about 20 or so insurgents, middle-aged males around a known cache site, RPGs, mortar rounds, and they were Captain Trahan was gonna set up a QRF to go out and see what's up. So we loaded up, and Ray and I are in the back of this turtle shell vehicle, and we're crammed in. It seemed like about 7 truckloads of rednecks gonna go shoot a deer, one deer, and there's gun barrels sticking out every window. It's just crazy. I was like, they gotta see us coming, because we're putting up a huge dust signature getting to the border. We get up on this ridge line, and what I think had happened was they couldn't get back into Pakistan because the train was very aggressive. So they set up a hasty ambush on us. So we dismounted, Ray and I, and he's getting his ruck, and I got my stuff, and we're walking to where Captain Trahan and all the staff are at, FSO, platoon commanders, and all of a sudden they start getting mowed down. Grenades are coming up out of the wadi and across the wadi. RPGs are being shot at us, heavy weapons, every PKM, they're just lighting us up. And we obviously hit the ground. Captain Trahan got shot 6 times, Specialist Reed, the FO got hit by 2 grenades. He's all peppered up, his weapon's out of service, but he's got his radio. I'm looking for cover. I turned to Ray, I said, get Tombstone on the radio, tell him troops in contact, 1972 enable. He starts putting the antenna out, and I look in front of me from here to the fridge, this guy about 20 meters away, this guy steps out from behind a boulder and shoots an RBG right between Ray and I. And it was like, this is real. This is not a 3D movie, this is real. You can hear guys screaming, guys cussing, and I'm looking for cover, there's nothing. It's like being on top of a table. And I saw to about 50, 100 meters away, it was an up armor Humvee. I was like, Air Force guy's gonna go hide behind Humvee. So I start running, and I tell him to get the ruck, I got the antenna, we start running to the vehicle, and it's like running through in quicksand. I couldn't get there fast enough. Taking shots at us, and get behind the vehicle, I start patting Ray down, and he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I was like, just making sure you're not shot, check me. So he checks me out, and he says, you're good. And we low crawl up beside the front passenger tire. I'm laying beside the tire, Ray is beside me. And I'm looking right over the ridge line, and I can see guys hopping from boulder to boulder, just trying to get back into Pakistan. We have a Pakistani checkpoint above us, and I'm like, okay, cool. This is gonna be, it's not gonna be east to west or west to east, it's gonna be north to south, south to north reciprocal. It's gonna be, we'll start with gun runs or a show of force. And at that time, the 50 gunner, he's shooting straight down. He's above me, shooting straight down. That's how close they are to us. So I low crawled back, go to open the passenger door, but the window's down. You know, leave the window down and up armor. So open up the back door, took shots on the door, yelled into the driver, hey, you got two guys laying by the front tire. If you need to leave, lay on the horn and we'll get in. He goes, Roger. Gunner's just get in. Ray yells to me, we got fighters. And I said, tell me, call sign and ETA, that's all I need. I already know the SCL if you tell me the call sign. He says, Blue 03, 5 mics. So I know I got a Danish or Norwegian F-16, 2 GBU-12s, a gun. Not gonna be any use to me. It's gonna be a show of force. It'll be really good, it'll be loud. The gunner gets shot in the forehead and falls, I've got the door open, falls, what I assume is dead inside the vehicle. So I crawl in to roll this kid over, expecting to see his head split open. And he's just looking up at me. He's trying to get his vision back. He's like, I'm like, dude, you good? You just got knocked the fuck out. And he's like, I'm good. I just got knocked the fuck out. And he's trying to, the whole front windshield is just splintered all to hell. He can't see out of it. And he's screaming for me to get on the 50. I got F-16s. I said, I've got fighters coming, you get on the 50. And at that time, the door starts banging into me. And I was like, okay, I stepped down, and now I'm standing there looking through the window, and I can see Ray on the ground, and he's holding his face, and he's kicking the door. He was listening, monitoring the radio. The round came through the top of the radio, the base of the antenna, took these two fingers off. This one was hanging by a piece of skin, hit him here, and he had no lower jaw. He was holding his face together, and blood was coming through his hands like somebody turned the faucet on. And it was really, really bad. So in colorful language, I get around the door, I get on the back of his low bearing gear, I start dragging him behind to get him behind the vehicle. This kid's been shot in the forehead, Ray's been shot in the face. They're definitely gonna shoot me. I'm not some little dude. I had no saliva in my mouth. I was having a tough time just breathing because my mouth was so chalky. And I'm falling down, and I'm telling Ray, help me, brother, we got this, we gotta get you behind the vehicle. And he's kicking at the ground. I get him behind the vehicle, and I'm holding him. And I'm screaming for Doc Simmons, the medic. I'm medic, over and over. I'm looking down, and Ray's just looking up at me, and blood is just spraying, like just, I'm covered. Everything's slippery, everything smells a certain way. Combat Lifesaver Qualified had no bag, so it's a second foul. I just felt like a failure, it's my fault. Why didn't I put him in the vehicle? Why didn't I put him in the vehicle? Just, he would have been fine. Then I hear Blue 03 on the radio, and I had to lay Ray down, low crawled up, grab the rooks, grab the weapons, pulled it all back, Blue 03, Hard Rock 11, stand by. And I kept screaming for the medic, no one was coming. And then the 105 started coming down. Specialist Reed was putting them right down in the ravine and walking them east. So now I'm on top of Ray holding them, and the breeze coming down, and the concussion of those 105s going off. It's deafening. It's deafening. He's responding less and less. Then I'm telling him, brother, we're bringing the fight. You got to hang in there. We'll get you a medevac. Just hang in there. Relax, brother. We got this. And I'm trying to figure direct pressure, but where do I help this kid? I felt helpless. And all of a sudden, 2 soldiers come low crawling behind the vehicle. One's a female. I was like, what's she doing here? She was an MP. She's one of the drivers. And they had a CLS bag. I was just like, wow. And so we started working on him. I'm holding him. I'm trying to get his sleeve up. They can't get any vein on him. They try his hands, they try his arm. I can't even remember where they got it. They got an IV in him, but I can't remember where they put it. We picked him up, we put him in the back of the vehicle, and they started leaving. And about the same time, Lieutenant Milan, team commander, started screaming for us to fall back because we started taking ground unevenly. We fall back, I got the rucks, the weapons, and I am, from my chin to my feet, I am cherry red, and it's slippery. I sat down, I was sitting next to Lieutenant Dolan, the FSO, and he's just like, oh my God, you're shot. I was like, it's not me, it's Ray. Ray's gone. And I couldn't get the blood off my hands. I kept wiping it in the dirt, wiping it on my pants, but there's blood and there's stuff all over my pants. I couldn't get it off. Then I'm sticky, and the smell gets intense. It was really hard to get through that part. And then I heard Blue 03 call me. Blue 03, Hard Rock 11, say fire to fact, say playtime. Nothing. Hard Rock, Blue 03. This is Hard Rock, have you loud and clear. Say playtime, go with fire to fact. Nothing. Then I heard bar 5-2, 2 A10s check on station. I'm like, thank God, I got A10. It'll be easy. Bar 5-2 is Hard Rock 11. How copy? See, someone's breaking squelch, but you can't hear them. I'm like, so then I'm in the ruck. I'm trying to go from primary, secondary, primary, green to red, red to green, trying everything. Lieutenant Dolan's RTO is trying to help me, nothing. Can't figure anything out. And about that time, Ace 11, Apaches flies by. The medevac had landed at the fob and pushed forward the 2 Apaches. And just visually, I saw him fly by, and then I saw Lieutenant Dolan, and I saw him again, and I was like, wait a second. Lieutenant Dolan's got Singars. They got Singars. 452 has Singars. And all the little wheels in my head started like, I can do this. Call Ace 11, tell him I need bore 52 on this push. And he goes, what? I said, pull Ace 11 on your freak. I need to talk to him. We need to get Cass on station. He just handed me the mic. He says, you can do it better than I can. Now I got the fires net. And they're trying to confirm my call sign. I'm like, dude, I got people shooting at me. And check it out. Get off the mic, dude. I need to talk to Ace 11. And so I get Ace 11, I get bore 52, and then it's just start patch situation updates. But I have to tell them. So I got them on the fires, and I seen min-max and gun to target line. Give me that. They gave me that, and I pushed all fixed wing 1,000 feet above that, and I pushed all rotary north of that, surface to 300. Eventually I had 8 Apaches, 4 A10s, 2 F-16s, 2 Harriers, and a B-1, and the 105s. But, so then I deconflicted on the fly and just started doing the best I can to get them to do a show of force. We had a lot of problems with the checkpoint above us. We weren't sure if they were insurgents or Pakistanians, guards, and they had a cruiser weapon in the back of a pickup truck. So I had one of the helicopters flying above them, just following up the mountain. I said, anybody gets on that weapon, you just take out the whole vehicle. Then I had there was a bulldozer coming from the border, send Apaches out there. Eventually, everything ended there. And I was told on scene that Ray had made it. And I think they were just telling me that so I could stop asking and do my job. And everything was very low at the time. So we eventually got back and they told me he was gone. He didn't make it. He didn't make it to Bagram. He lost too much blood. And we had a reserve doc from the University of Texas was at skin, and he said, Lee, if I was laying right beside you, Ray still wouldn't have made it. There was nothing we could do. And it struggled with it. And then had to pack his gear up. And I had to go back with QRF and carry all the stuff and whatnot. And then I got back and they were like, hey, you're on the next C-17 out of here. I was like, I can't go back now, man. Like, why? He says, you're within weeks from going anyway or whatever. Like, I go back, I gotta be a dad. I gotta be a husband, I gotta be an NCO. I don't know what to do right now. And I said, I gotta be here with my guys. There was no go to Europe for 30 days back then and decompress and then you go home. There was none of that. I said, no, I'll pull talk duty, I'll do whatever I gotta do, I'll go on missions. I just can't go home, I can't function. I said, get everybody here, I'll tell everybody the story. I don't want to tell it 100 times. Of course, it's been thousands of times since then, but very therapeutic, but it's just part of my life, man. And I demand the very best out of TACPs now.
It was crazy thinking back on it because Ray Lozano's death occurred while I was in Block 1 of the schoolhouse. And it had immediately followed Jacob Fraser's, which was a month prior. So us as students, you know, we had volunteered to do this job during 2 wars going on. So we kind of knew what we were signing up for, what we were getting ourselves into. But to see the instructor cadre at this time, who had only been TACPs in the 90s, where they've never done the job for real. And in combat, you saw the light bulb all of a sudden go off, you know, after getting the news a month after the first one that TACPs are being killed in combat. And, you know, post Ray Lozano's death, everything was very calm for a while until January 3rd, 2010. That morning I was in early because we were just coming off Christmas break for the students. I was an instructor, so we were in the office at around 4 a.m. and got a phone call from my childhood best friend, retired Master Sergeant Ben Gartner, who also is a lifelong TACP as well. Very brief, just, hey man, we lost Brad Smith today. And Brad had just PCS'd from Fort Bragg and was very close with him and his wife, Tiffany. So that was a huge shock. And at the time I was running the TACP Association, so kind of just went straight into, oh my God, what do we do mode? And ran into the squadron, sat down with our commandant at the time, Chief Master Sergeant Troy Lundquist, and he essentially just said, go get in the car and get up there now and do whatever needs to be done. So I jumped in the car and we drove to Troy, Illinois that day. And watching everything unfold that just has to get done that you don't want to deal with. You know, I remember we were in the funeral home with the family and Tiffany specifically, and the funeral director's trying to ask her, you know, well, we need you to pick out a casket. And she just kind of threw her hands down and was like, I don't give a shit. And she looks at me, she goes, you guys figure it out, and walks out. And it's like, that's the reality of this manor is like, you have the most devastating news to a new wife and a new mother. Chloe was 3 weeks old when Brad was killed. And now all of a sudden you're being bombarded with all these decisions that you never thought that you would have to be making, like picking out a casket. I would say like the single toughest thing that I did in my entire career was myself and Brandon Cullen Towell and a couple others had to put Brad's beret on his body the correct way. Morticians didn't know how the beret went on, so they asked us to do it. And it took us well over an hour. We had to do it in shifts of like 15 seconds apiece, because here we are with our buddy laying in the casket trying to put his beret on him for an open casket.
As Smith's platoon entered the village, they were ambushed by a complex attack consisting of simultaneous mortars, improvised explosive devices, and machine gun fire. Without hesitation, he ran through lethal crossfire into the creek to save his comrades. He retrieved the dismembered soldier and maneuvered toward the casualty collection point. It was at this time a second improvised explosive device detonated as he approached the collection point, killing him instantly.
Like that one, I think, refreshed the entire career field that, hey, this is real again, guys. Like, not that I think that they ever lost it, but I think, you know, there was a sense of invincibility in the TACP mindset, because we do, every time we walk out, you know, we walk out with backup in our ear. And that gives you a sense of security, because, you know, hey, if something goes down, I at least know who to call and I know how to get it here.
We're naming this facility where TACPs start their training after him. Really makes me proud, because I really want the guys coming into this career field to know the big shoes that they have to fill.
The TACP community has really been a huge part of my healing process. They've been supporting me from day one that we found out that Brad wasn't with us anymore. They've rallied around me and my daughter. They have given us support in so many ways, to having a building dedicated where every single TACP is going to come through and know my husband's name, which means the world to me.
Around this time, a few really awesome individuals that were at the schoolhouse, specifically I want to talk about Brian Murray. You know, him and a number of others were working very hard on giving us a monument, something for us to kind of hold dearly as a career field, as well as being the gateway into the career field at the schoolhouse. We wanted something to show the students, like, that showed them the sacrifice and everything like that. So they had designed the TACP monument.
Today is a significant event in the history of the TACP community. We have gathered here to dedicate not just a memorial, but a symbol that recognizes the innumerable sacrifices made daily by TACP personnel, past and present, throughout the years.
And that is where, still to this day, we place all of the names of our fallen, both killed in training and killed in action, are all displayed on this monument, to include members of what we have, you know, what we call the Tactical Air Control Party as a whole. So we do include a radio maintenance member that was killed in action, as well as ALOS, because shortly after Brad was killed, another 2 years later, we lost Major David Gray. And again, these are hard, super hard hits to the career field. Dave Gray was an enlisted TACP in his previous career, commissioned as an officer, and then went back through the schoolhouse a second time, because they said it had been too long that he had been a TACP. He has to go to the schoolhouse again. And I remember him getting in my block and just pulling him aside finally, and the first morning going, yeah, you know, I honestly don't care what you do. You've already earned that beret in my book, so you're good with me. The monument stands tall at the schoolhouse, and it's a symbol for us to show our guys that never came home.
We started deploying forces to Afghanistan, and then 2 years later into Iraq. Those guys went in and really dropped so much tonnage with almost no incidents of fratricide that trust really exploded. Instead of dropping dumb munitions, Mark 82s, the Joint Direct Attack munition, the JDAM, came out. And I remember we were about to cross from Kuwait into Iraq, and this great air liaison officer we had, who was a A-10 pilot, none of us had ever practiced controlling JDAMs. And so we got a quick class, literally in the dirt, just before we crossed from Kuwait into Iraq, from this guy, on how to control these things and how they flew through the air and what they did. So that's a technological shift that made precision strike capability a hallmark of being a JTAC.
Start down in the very narrow Iraqi coastline, only about 19 miles down there. We're talking about Qasr and what's going on down there as we move up toward Basra.
The events of that night of the Sandstorm Fight, I didn't really know exactly where they were coming from because they were coming from everywhere, but I knew that humans are going to try to get to the easiest route to get to us. Since the Sandstorm was inhibiting sensors, ground sensors, it was also inhibiting any kind of artillery response to that, and it's basically left up to the air with the E8 queuing, J-stars, everybody tracking those guys. That is the epitome or the true definition of fog of war. What you have to do is you have to build sort of like a matrix of TRPs, or targeting referencing points, that the artillery uses. Ground cast wasn't getting to us, it wasn't getting alerted. A lot of the cast was moved out at that point, so a lot of the stuff we were getting had a lot of JDAMs on it, a lot of GPS. So I had to take that GPS coordinate, and with my ROMAD, Hardy, we had to convert those over each one. And it didn't matter if it was going to be close or not. It just mattered that it got close enough. Okay, hey, look at number 5. Boom, okay, there they are. Okay, what's that coordinate? Okay, map and compass skills, essentially, to make that work, and then doing all that conversion. Now, we were also ready to make sure that the coordinates, the lat longs that were going, the conversion from grid to lat longs was sound. That made me more nervous than anything. So not only did we have a series of 1 to 50 maps, we had to take the GPS coordinate, make sure that was in the lat long, and then we would double check it on the map and see if the lat long was close enough. Made me really nervous. The volume of fire was so intense on the ground that it was literally snapping a lot of the antennas off the vehicles. It was crazy. We had the only long-range communication available with the SATCOM. And then stuff started showing up, and we just started bombing around us, bombing where we think they were coming up. I wouldn't recommend ever using cluster munitions and danger close, but we had to do that too. That was really fun. Not highly recommended if it was a Yelp review. But one of the F-16 pilots, they were there. They were out of fuel. They said, well, too bad, we're gonna stay and help. To get the bomb into the right place, the coordinates I gave them, they dove into the sandstorm and it almost screwed up their plane, really bad. Once they were Winchester, they RTB'd, but they weren't gonna make it back. And he told me that. They Winchestered their aircraft, knowing that they weren't gonna make it back, and burned all their fuel just to stay there. Winchester is a call made by an aircraft when all ordnance are gone. They are completely empty, the aircraft. So that could include their guns, mainly includes their bombs. So there was no gun, in that situation with the Sandstorm, there was no guns available that couldn't get to that point. So when they called Winchester, it was they had dropped all ordnance off the aircraft. The refueler came back for the B-1, and then they got to that refueler, and then they made it back, thank God. We fought pretty hard that night. The soldiers did a fantastic job. We ended up going black on ammo and having to like use a lot of the AKs that were AKMs or what have you. And then it started raining. And then it got really quiet. And all you could hear was the tanks, just going back and forth with their sensors, just trying to find something out of the sand. Then we get that call that armor force is moving in, and I'm like, oh crap, there's nothing left. I think everything was gone at that point. And a B-1 was going home. They brought that guy in. A refueler was going home. They linked them up, and the guy had 12 GBU-31s, which is 2,000-pound JDAM on there, and it was perfect. That's exactly what I needed. B-1 shows up. I'm like, okay, let's do this. So a lot of conversation. Boom, boom, boom. Come up with a plan. The plan was drop that first JDAMs right here, right in the front of them, or near the middle front of them, and then drop it kind of behind them. Let the B-1 know what I wanted to do, and he goes, okay. That first bomb hits those guys, and then the second bomb hits and breaks up that attack, that formation. And then one of our scouts goes out there and takes a look, and he gives me the, he's like, hey, there's still more out here. I was like, okay, give me distance and direction. And he gives me a distance and direction from one of the craters. Good enough, did it again. We were pretty happy. They were really happy. And yeah, it was a pretty good night to take out the enemy. And those guys are amazing. They were real happy with me. They're happy with the team. I was happy with my ROMAD, and 189 guys went into that, and 189 guys came out of it.
So up to this point, we had the invasion of Afghanistan immediately followed by the invasion of Iraq. And then things just became normal ops. You had the teams that were regularly deploying to OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom, and the teams that were regularly deploying to Operation Iraqi Freedom. And we were getting into a very sort of constant flow with the way that TACPs were being deployed. But then, the end of 2006, you had President Bush conduct the Baghdad or Iraq search. And this was right into 2007, plussed up with between 20 and 30,000 troops for the following 2 years to essentially curtail the amount of increased sectarian violence that was going on there. And this is when, post-invasion, things were kind of flattened, and then things got really heavy during this time period. You had tons of crews inside Baghdad, completely plussed up, and fighting was going on daily. And over the course of the surge, you had almost every type of Army combat maneuver unit deployed. You had mechanized infantry, light infantry, airborne infantry, armor, cavalry. They all were there fighting. And this fighting kept going strong for well over a year.
The backstory on Cam and I was a company first sergeant in the Rangers, and at that time, Cam was one of the JTACs in the company, and so I had known and worked and trained with him, and I was always very impressed with Cam. And being a part of that, I got to handpick my teammates for the most part, and without question, I wanted Cam on the team right away. So I was able to get Cam to be my JTAC. So we got the call to go out on an operation. Pretty standard planning cycle. Nothing that I remember that jumps out.
A lot of the missions that we were doing during this particular time frame was mostly elimination. On this particular night, I was in a helicopter that was not American made, so I couldn't plug my audio headset into the radio, so I came off the back of the aircraft not knowing where all my aircraft were in the stack. Obviously, I established the concept of fires, so there was a lot of pre-coordination, so the assumption would be that they are all where I told them to be. We landed about a kilometer away due to the terrain, lots of terraces. There was a creek that prevented our immediate movement towards target.
We knew pretty quick. I remember while we were walking, grabbing Cam and going this is not, we're not in a good spot. We were in a piece of low ground, we were funneled in, very high terraces on the left and right, very narrow creekway, and dark canopy, very hard to see with any night vision depth.
The objective that we were trying to go capture and or eliminate, the brevity term for it is squirted off the target. So the rotor audible signature had alerted him to our presence, that we were most likely coming after him. Thankfully, I had 12 or 14 assets that were above head that were tracking his location, utilizing their imagery sensors and other sensors. But him and 8 of his friends had departed from the objective building and tried to head into the tree line.
The guys up front were in, small arms contact, quite a bit of contact. Cam and I continued to move forward so we could get eyes on. I was trying to think through solutions. How do we get out of this? Cam and I are constantly talking, okay, what is the minimum safe distance right now? Where's the lead element? Where do we think the target is? At this point, our weapon is the assets. Cam was my weapon, right? And then as we're starting to pull guys back, one of our U.S. advisors, looks like he just gets laid out in front of us. He's probably 10 to 15 meters in front of us. I thought for sure he was dead. So I immediately moved to him, and Cam, being who he is and what he provides, is always right by my side as a ground force commander. And we moved forward and grabbed the guy, and fortunate he was not dead, and he took a shot to the shoulder, but was pretty banged up. And so Cam and I carried him back to our medic and got him some immediate medical treatment. Obviously at that point, things were not going well, and I knew we needed to get out of there quickly. So I told Cam we needed to get as far forward as we possibly could to identify all the forward positions, because I wanted to call in, at that point, AC-130. Cam told me, he said, hey, we can do 40 Mike, but it's gonna be danger close. And up to this point, I had never called in a danger close fire mission. But you have to give your initials as a ground force commander when you're calling in danger close. And what you're doing is, when you say that, when you give your initials, you are assuming all responsibility for whatever happens.
He said to just eliminate them. So he said, call in your airstrikes, do what you need to do. I immediately called up the AC-130. I set up what's called a tactical engagement zone. I essentially just coordinated a multi-asset attack. It's pitch black, and we are sprinting at full speed. We're jumping down terraces. I'm trying to keep track of the other half of my team, so. We're
still getting machine gun fire down this creek bed. And I told Cam we need something else. We need some other kind of solutions. So he said the next thing we have is 105s, but we were way too close at that point. I mean, there was no way we could shoot 105s from the position we were in. So I started calling ahead to find out where our lead elements were. We found that we had one guy who was pinned down, so Cam and I got into a position where we could assist that guy so he could break contact.
14 assets talking in this ear. I have multiple teams talking in this ear, and I'm yelling back and forth with the ground force commander while running at full speed through the darkness. I dropped, I think, 4 or 5 500-pound bombs. I have multiple Hellfires coming in from the H-64s. I have a couple 105s coming from the AC-130. The 9 people that we were trying to eliminate, well, they had disappeared in a tree line. We had to go and conduct battle damage assessments.
I think that might have been about the part Cam took around to his chest. I think it lodged in his magazines.
My ground force commander opted for us to stay a little bit more in the rear. The problem with staying in the rear is that when you're behind enemy lines, there is no rear. You are completely surrounded, and everything is the front. We had Assault Force 1, which was clearing in from our left. We had Assault Force 2 that was clearing from our right, and we were sitting back. I asked the AC-130, for BDA, the battle damage assessment. He told me 9 EKIA, indicating that he did in fact see or can properly assess that there were no more of these enemy forces that were alive. I'm now prepping all my assets for a follow-on mission. Down to my left, there was about a 3-foot drop into a farm field. And then to my right, there was a major embankment. I want to say it was like a 70-degree embankment into a creek bed that was completely pitch black. And we've been standing there for about 10, 15 minutes, and I've been operating on both my radios, talking to the GFC. My commander, who was a sergeant major at the time, he goes, hey, we're gonna move forward about 100 meters, we're gonna go lock down this building, and we're gonna set up a blocking position for when Assault Force 1 reaches this point. I'm like, that sounds great. I start telling the aircraft what the plan is on the ground. And my sergeant major is slightly shorter than me, and I'm walking about maybe an arm's length behind him.
And I remember telling Cam and the RTO, something's not right. Like, let's shut up for a second, keep our voices down. I was walking on this kind of terraced, elevated position. It was like a creek. I think it was down to our right, if I remember correctly, and then like some fields off to my left. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked to be, and in real time looked to be like just a tree limb that was moving. But as I turned and looked, it was a machine gun.
I remember I was looking down my ATAC, the phone that we wear on our chest for battle Blue Force tracking. I flip it up, and we maybe take like 4 or 5 steps. And right at that moment, I see Phil, my sergeant major. He looks down to the right, and this huge burst of PKM fire comes out from about a meter away from him. And I see Phil just drop. He drops like a sack of rocks. And in that moment, I had was half of a second. It felt like almost an eternity. I had assessed in that moment that Phil had just taken multiple rounds of PKM fire to the face, and he is either expectant to die or that he's wounded and he's in a vulnerable position on his back. Without really understanding what I was about to do, I had jumped in front of this actively firing machine gun and put my plate between Phil and this machine gunner who had been hiding underneath of a blanket in the darkness. He looked like a rock. I stared down the barrel of this actively firing machine gun and then just put 20-something rounds in this dude's face at the expense of possibly my own life. I need to do what I need to do for my teammate and my commander. Because of the embankment and because he was sitting on the machine gun the way he was, I could not tell if my rounds were effective. I had my laser on and it was only about a meter away, but because of the way he fell on the gun, I could not tell that he was dead or alive. I think I put about 20 rounds into his face at about a meter, and rounds started impacting around my feet and in front of this enemy PAX from another individual that was about 20 meters into this creek bed. I kind of turned it over, put 10 rounds right behind where I could see the muzzle flash, because I couldn't see the individual unless he was firing. So I shot at the muzzle flash. I believe I eliminated him. And then somebody from behind had grabbed me and started pulling on me. And I, at that moment, was like, I am surrounded in every way and I'm about to get into hand-to-hand combat. Thankfully, it was Phil. He was alive. He was okay.
I got knocked to my ass. I remember sitting up and just, unloading an entire mag between my legs from my ass at this position. And the perfect timing when the last round empties my magazine, Cam steps over the top of me. He began to engage that position, gave me enough time to load a magazine and roll out of the way. I pulled Cam down. We both threw a couple frags.
And he yelled grenades. So me, Phil, and the RTO that was with me, a fellow ranger, we all pulled pins on our grenades, threw them down the creek bed, and we eliminated whoever else was left. The guy that I initially eliminated on that machine gun that was now only about 2-3 meters away, we put more rounds into him because he was still on the gun and kind of in the frantic moment of being surprised that way. Purple flames erupted from his chest, and that's when Phil yelled S-Fest, and then we got down, and in my opinion, it was 100% like a suicide mission for that individual. But not only did we escape from an air ambush at like 1 meter, I think that his end goal was to die that night, but with the sole intent of eliminating us in the process. Recovering from all of that, I get back on the radio, I start talking about what had just happened. This all happened within about 10 seconds. In the initial blast that was meant to kill Phil, one of our interagency operators had taken a PKM round to his humerus, which basically like liquefied his arm. The only thing that was kind of holding his arm together was just the tricep tissue. So I start calling up for sensors to collapse on me, start doing these intercordon scans, look for any hot spots. I start getting updates on where the assault forces are. Hey, let's, not only is the GFC wounded, but now our interagency GFC, ground force commander, is also wounded. We need to get a medevac out. I have the AC-130 sensor go defensive right on my position, and he calls out a hotspot that is only about 10 meters into one of those little farm fields that was in the depressed land, about 10 meters away from us. I see a big laser beam come down from their IR pointer, and sure enough, he's like 10 meters away in the prone with a machine gun and a chest rack. We were 100% surrounded. Nothing super consequential came from that. The assault force got over there, eliminated the enemy target, but we were able to secure our position. However, due to the terrain, we had to go and find a suitable helicopter landing zone. So me and the Ranger medic, we went off looking for a place to set down for an immediate exfil and with the hopes of, hey, our GFCs will be okay. they're going to be stable. Me walking around with just one other American Ranger, which best fighting force on the planet right there, it still was a little nerve-wracking. Completely removed about a good 500, 600 meters away from everybody else through the night. Never been in this position before, never been in this location, and I need to find a place to put this giant helicopter down. We found it. The whole assault force comes to us. We get on the bird. The interagency ground force commander, he's going to be okay. We all know that. Well, as I'm sitting there, and there's only like a 12-minute time of flight from where we were to going back to the base, and I can't plug in anything, I can't talk to anybody, it's too loud. I kind of have this moment of self-reflection where it's like everything that just happened kind of finally dawned on me. I jumped in front of an actively firing machine gun, and in that moment, one, I was really proud of my automatic reaction, which is defend my friend. However, at that time, I only had 2 kids. Now I have 3, but I had 2 kids, and I thought, wow, what if that went different? Would my sacrifice have been in vain if Phil was in fact mortally wounded? Would my kids not have a father? Would my wife not have a husband? And I remember just being so distraught over that moment. And while I was extremely proud, I was also, wow, that was almost reckless. Because of the possible consequences of what had happened that night, it kind of messed me up a little bit with the internal struggle. However, I'm really proud of everything that we were able to accomplish that night.
I definitely didn't get a good understanding of how close it was until we got back after the operation. Cam showed me, and then we realized, like, holy shit, man, it was a pretty gnarly environment. I think the story though is Cam didn't think twice about his actions, right? Like his interpretation of what happened that night was I got laid out, and he didn't even think twice, and nor did the RTO who came up right behind us. So when we got back, we had to do all the post-mission debriefs, and I remember the command calling and wanting to know, hey, talk to me, like what happened out there. And I remember I was talking to Cam's boss, who was up at the higher headquarters, and he asked me how Cam performed, and I obviously was like, we wouldn't have made it out if Cam wasn't able to do what he did as well as he did it. The next day, his Air Force boss, not his Army boss, but his Air Force boss called and said, hey, I think we're gonna put Cam in for something. Do you support? And I said, hands down, 100%.
What Cam did on that day is nothing short of heroic.
He was definitely deserving of recognition, and as were other guys on the team as well who did some things. So, I supported 100% the recognition that I thought he deserved. And then when they said it was a Silver Star, I didn't think twice about it. Absolutely supported it.
There was a call for, hey, we need an advanced course that teaches JTACs all the minutia and finite detail about weaponeering and about controlling airspace and about how to mass effects and how to engage targets simultaneously with different flavors and styles of aircraft, and how to do the deep fight, the rear fight, and the close air support fight simultaneously while doing air interdiction, while doing electronic warfare. And the only place that taught that sort of thing was the Air Force Weapons School. And so those guys, for 75 years, prior to us asking for this capability, for 75 years, it had been an officer-only, fighter pilot-only kind of place. It was the most selective club that the Air Force had, in my opinion. Through tons of lobbying, tons of effects on the battlefield, and then finally, those senior officers from the joint services saying, yes, these guys should be given every opportunity to affect counterland doctrine, to affect the battle space. Ultimately, that happened. I was able to stand that up in 2012, but it took 7 years of asking for things to happen. So multiple more deployments, more lives lost, more and more sacrifice by the joint force to go get things done. And then we finally launched this course, and we had doors open to us and academic principles open to us and range space with elegant weapons open to us that before they would have never, I don't want to say wasted, but they'd have never given us access to.
In the future, TACPs are going to be asked to integrate more than just CAS, and it's going to be under the worst possible circumstances. And so the TACPs out there and the commanders and the units that are investing in understanding how to integrate space electronic warfare, communications, close air support, all of these areas, those integrators are really going to change the battle of the future. Artillery was king of the battlefield for a long time. I would tell you integration is now. Feeling the reward that you get from going on hard missions with great organizations and employing CAS as being trusted to employ CAS as a part of that and seeing the impact it can have on operations is incredible. And it was everything I wanted to do, and I wish I could still do it.
What I look for when I was an instructor, as a supervisor, as a senior leader, what I need and what I want to be in this career field is someone that's self-motivating, that doesn't need to be motivated, that has it internally, that also is able to critically think about situations that they're in and work through that process. But we need to then work through those difficult situations that your unit might be in. I need a young man, a young woman that is going to be able to critically think about that situation and be able to deliver what that ground commander needs. Sometimes you don't need CAS in the situation. Sometimes it's talking that commander out of close air support.
We select for attributes. It's not potential, it's what have you already demonstrated. So often you hear, you got promoted based on potential. That's not the way we approach this. We look for attributes. Are you motivated? Are you sharp? Do you stand up for the men who are going to need you to lead them in tough times? Do you understand? Are you well versed in joint doctrine? Do you commit yourself to the things that you need to do, not only academically, physically? Are you technically sound when it comes to firearms and everything else tactically that a good special operations officer should be? So that's what I want to stress there. The Air Force loves to say we promote on potential. No, you have to select based on attributes that have already been demonstrated, and that's something that we got right.
You are nothing but a problem solver that has to figure out, how am I going to get this done? Whatever the this is, it's your job to get this done, and you can find yourself out there almost all by yourself. The task was put before you, you got to figure it out. If your radio's not working, you just became a radio repairman, whether you wanted to be or not. You've got to figure it out. So it's got to be a very highly intelligent individual that is used to succeeding. We can't tolerate someone that's going to quit. Right? So the TACP schoolhouse is fairly difficult. It needs to be. You've got to have individuals that when they get into the worst day of their life, they're not going to curl up in a fetal position and say, boy, this sucks. Right? They're going to figure out a way that they're going to overcome. And whether that be as a JTAC, that they're controlling a kinetic effect onto a target, or they're talking to that Army combat maneuver.
Because we are so small, there's a good possibility with, you mentioned 3 people, you can do the 7 levels of Kevin Bacon. You can do that in this community because we're so small and we're so tight, because we all are essentially family members. And that's what we treated the TACP Association.
Out of my entire Air Force career, that I miss the people. So within the career field, I miss the people. I'm the guy that says, oh yeah, I'll talk to you next week, and next week turns into 1 or 2 years or so. But what I notice is every time a text comes out or you reach out to someone, the love is there. So I truly miss the brotherhood of the career field. But anytime we all are able to get together, it's a genuine brotherly love. That's the one thing I miss the most about the Air Force. And that does go back, even if you look at my entire career, it goes back to being a TACP. It was special. I was a young, city kid, didn't know about the Air Force, didn't know how it really operated. And I had folks that would just push me along, and actually they would put me in position to excel when I didn't know that that's what they were doing. But now when I can reflect and look back, that's actually what they were doing. Hey, we see potential in this kid, let's put him here and kind of see all the operation and let's move him along. And there are so many people within the career field that did that for me.
You're given a canvas. Wherever you want to take your career, you have the opportunity to take it. We don't get pipelined the same schools as some of the other career fields, but there's opportunities there, right? You can do the conventional gig, you can do the airborne gig, you can do the soft role, right? You can do white soft, black soft, you can do support roles. The sky's the limit with that. Now that I'm out, what do I miss the most? I miss everything about it. If I didn't have a little one at home, I think I'd still be doing it in some capacity. I don't think I'd still be doing it, I'd be doing it. Because I think at some point, whether you have it before you go in or you get it created when you're in, there's something in you that you gotta feed. I miss it. Just the people, it's the team. I don't think there's any better job out there. This is it.
It wasn't just a job. I didn't just go and do a 9 to 5 and then I went home. When I did my job, the battle was over.
Our utility becomes even more than just providing close air support, but to ensuring that information moves to maximize our ability to inflict damage on whichever enemy we face.
I can't help but think about one of my favorite quotes by Mike Tyson, is that everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What we're producing and the guys that we have in our formation have the ability to punch them in the mouth and take away every plan and idea that they thought they had. You know, I get asked a lot, people kind of dig in and they wonder what the future of TACP is gonna be. Like, so is there gonna be close air support and are you guys gonna be doing 9 lines if we go into, you know, World War III or whatever the future conflict has in store for us? And I always kind of think of it like a lot of those questions even really only look at it like I'm a musician. And I think of a TACP as a lot more of a conductor. So I think of a TACP as somebody that sees the tempo and shape and mood of a battle space and shapes a symphony to solve that problem and meet the threat that's awaiting them. And so the reality is now more than ever, you need a conductor that you can put somewhere where they can see the enemy, they can make sense of the enemy, and they can understand how to piece that together. So as we look into the future, we try to figure out how we're going to solve these seemingly impossible problems and what TACP is going to do to contribute and how we're going to control the battle space of the future. The recipe is already there. The farther forward we are, the less decision superiority any enemy is going to have, and the more useful the tools of the United States are.
Funny, there was a movie out called Heartbreak Ridge. I'll kind of summarize a little bit. The white truck on the runway, I was behind that white truck, me and several other Rangers, and the first casualty was Ranger Umonte. He got hit right straight in the face, and he was next to me. He was shoulder to shoulder with me. And how that happened, we started taking small fire, so we hid behind that truck. And we were laying down on the ground on the runway behind that truck, and AC-130's over top. I'm not talking to him yet, but Sergeant Ramsey asked me to check on Umonte because he stopped firing. He was an M60 gunner, and he wasn't firing. So I hit him. I said, "Are you all right?" I thought he had a jam or something, you know. So I'm hitting him, and he just leaned over, and he'd been shot in the face. And I said, "Oh God!" So I told Ramsey. I said, "He's dead." He said, "What?" I said, "He's dead." Holy shit! So he asked me to get some air power. He said, "You got to take that building out." That's where it came out, building over there, because he fired some laws at it, and they didn't do any good, because laws will go through a building, and they won't impact it, hit something really solid. And anyhow, he said, "You need to get some air in there." Now this is not to be funny, but it's kind of cool. I called up 1:30. Told him we had target, told him where it was. You got the white truck on the east end of the runway. Yeah, roger that. Okay, there's a building just north of that, a couple hundred yards. And he said, how far? I was a couple hundred yards. He says, danger close, you know, we cannot fire on that target. And I said, we're taking heavy rounds from that target. And so they put some 20s on it, you know, and tried to boom it up a little bit, and it didn't do anything. And then Ramsey said, how come you're not taking out that target? I said, they won't fire, it's too close. And he said, well, you tell them to fire on it. And I called him up again. I said, hey, we need ordnance unit 105 on that building. And he said, it's danger close. We'll need company commander approval to fire that close. I said, okay, there's no company commander here, you know? So I looked at Ramsey and I said, they need commander's approval. And he said, you got it. I'm the commander of this section right here. And I said, okay. So I pressed the mic and I said, you got, and boom. Before I could even finish the conversation, the rounds came out, hit that building and blew it up. I couldn't buy a beer on River Street for 2 years. But the command, the S3 and all those guys, definitely we proved our worth to them. And I couldn't tell you how many times that Rangers over the years, the reunions I've gone back to, come up and shake my hand, thank you for saving my life, you know?